This is the lecture for week 4, and the focus this week is on case studies and collaboration. Now, lest you think I'm some kind of techno snob, I'll point out that FEMA is doing their best to harness the burgeoning technological possibilities of the digital era as well. They too are able to see the general trajectory of emergency management and recognize that there are innovative ways to solve problems quicker and cheaper than they did in the past. And those two words are not generally associated with government, so that's innovative to be sure. Here you'll see that FEMA published a guide to help all agencies better understand and utilize social media and other web tools. So in the introduction itself, this is what they write. Social media and collaborative technologies have become critical components of emergency preparedness, response, and recovery. From the international response efforts after major tsunamis to hurricane recovery in major U.S. cities, many government officials now turn to social media technologies to share information and connect with citizens during all phases of a crisis. Implementing these new technologies, however, requires that responding agencies adopt new communication strategies and engagement methods. And then here they continue, recognizing the need to address these challenges. Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate, they established the VSMWG, and the mission of that group is to provide guidance and best practices to the emergency preparedness and response community on the safe and sustainable use of social media technologies before, during, and after emergencies. So the point here is that the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA specifically is taking these things seriously. And for those that are interested, I have uploaded this document in the respective week for optional reading. Additionally, FEMA has a portion of their website dedicated to what they call strategic foresight. Here is the overview of what they describe as their goal. The world is changing in ways that may significantly impact the emergency management community. Thinking more broadly and over a longer time frame helps FEMA and its partners understand trends that may influence our mission space. This type of analysis, known as strategic foresight, enables us to better understand and anticipate risks and take advantage of opportunities in FEMA strategy, resource planning, and doctrine. You can see that there is a concerted effort for the federal government to be on the cutting edge of technology, and that is exactly the kind of change in worldview that takes place when digital natives are getting deep enough into career fields to make policy decisions. Here you see an excerpt from a brief document that FEMA put together about Strategic Foresight Initiative. In the previous slide, FEMA described the foresight they're striving for as one that, quote, understands trends, end quote. And in this document, we see that they highlight 4 goals. These goals include future trends, foresight in decision-making, support of applications of foresight, and applying that across the whole community. FEMA is trying to get their pulse on technology and on the people that they serve. As emergency managers, we need to do the same. Even more, as an emergency manager with a graduate degree, the expectation is that you, too, have a form of strategic foresight. So try to open your mind and exceed your comfort level so that others can benefit from your knowledge and experience. I wanted to briefly comment on the 4 case studies contained in Chapter 9 of the text. The main reason was to reorganize the way in which they were laid out so you could see them so you could actually see the change in technology and its application over time. So looking at them chronologically, we see that the earthquake in Haiti first occurred in 2010. During this event, an ad hoc team of people found a way to create a 911 system using texting. It's not that texting was just invented at that time, but integrating it into an emergency at this scale was a novel concept. This is also the first time that crowd mapping really became a thing. The book specifically refers to the crowdsourcing tools OpenStreetMap and Ushahidi that were used for that purpose. And crowd mapping technology is also used for civil disturbances. In fact, I found it interesting that while I was reading around myself on the Ushahidi site, I found an interactive map from the Occupy movement that coordinated locations and provided photos of the various demonstrations that took place during that time. Chronologically, the second of the four events was the Great East Japan Earthquake, or what's known as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant disaster that took place in 2011. Again, the text notes that a volunteer group created a technology known as SafeCast to, quote, collect and share radiation measurements, end quote. This, of course, was very important, as there was a lot of misinformation that was being disseminated by the formal sources of the Japanese government and the power company. This time we see that technology created by the volunteer group was able to be coordinated with Google Maps. This created a hybrid form of crowd mapping using different technologies. Also, social media was used to a greater extent to get information to people that was impossible for the government or the private company to control. A new form of transparency was born out of the disaster as a result of the emerging technology. In the following year, 2012, Hurricane Sandy hit. Our text notes that Sandy, quote, marked a shift in the use of social media in disasters, end quote. More than ever before, government agencies turned to mobile and online technologies before, during, and after Sandy made landfall to communicate with response partners and the public in order to share information, maintain awareness of community actions and needs, and more, as you can read right there. The big change here is that the government is taking the initiative to get more involved in the networking capabilities of social media. They were leveraging the technology for their response efforts, where volunteer groups and private organizations had to find ways to fund their projects in the past. Now we're seeing professionals getting involved at a very early stage, just 1 year later. The most recent of the four examples is the Boston Marathon, which took place in 2013. Once again, we can see there's a new iteration of this trend. Again, the text tells us that this event was a watershed moment related to the role of social media in a crisis. The difference this time was that the public themselves were helping to make the news. They were not just helping to crowd map the situation, they were providing up-to-date information to law enforcement and to news agencies and to other citizens, all at the same time. As noted in the book, they said, quote, the biggest change in breaking disaster news coverage is that news gathering and reporting is now done in real time in front of readers and viewers, end quote. It was the public that was given credit for helping to close the case. Of interest is the Google Person Finder page that I've pasted there on the right it was created voluntarily by Google engineers during the Haiti earthquake and has been utilized during many large-scale disasters for families to obviously get in touch with each other. This case study, unfortunately, is not a success story for emergency managers and, frankly, for law enforcement. In 2013, Chris Dorner was the subject of a manpower-intensive 10-day manhunt after murdering 4 people and wounding 3 others. He was a former Navy reservist and LAPD officer, and he was fired by the police department for lying. Following his dismissal, Dorner used Facebook to post an 11,000-word manifesto on the night of his first killing. In it, he listed his grievances against the city of Los Angeles and the LAPD. He wrote he was declaring unconventional and asymmetric warfare on the LAPD and anyone associated with them. Unlike other states, California has codified their response to emergencies by making it a law. They have what's referred to as the Standardized Emergency Management System, which serves as the fundamental structure for emergency response. It's designed to unify the response, provide integration of different agencies, provide standardization for a multi-jurisdictional response using the principles of ICS. So, given the fact this manhunt spanned 5 different counties, it appeared to be the perfect fit for an interoperable framework just like this. Unfortunately, many of the tools that have been referenced to this point in the lecture were not used by law enforcement. There was poor coordination among the police departments, particularly when it came to communicating with the media. Instead of getting timely, accurate information into the hands of thousands instantly, there were poorly worded, uncoordinated press conferences that resulted in equally poor messaging to the public. An independent review conducted by the Police Foundation described it as a, quote, culture of self-reliance, end quote. This is the opposite of interoperability and is exactly what today's emergency manager must avoid. That only comes by preparing today for the emergency of tomorrow. In their book Collaborate or Perish, authors Zachary Tuman and William Bratton, you may be familiar with Commissioner Bratton. He's the former Boston PD and NYPD commissioner and former LAPD chief of police. And he wrote, "Collaboration is about people. If it were only about technology, the one with the best toys would always win. Technology can tip change and speed it up. But in the networked world with change moving fast, success depends more than ever on having the right people saying yes and doing yes." He also said, or they also wrote, "A mindset that looks across boundaries of departments, companies, and nations and sees people as partners and change as opportunity, not threats. A mindset for collaboration." At the end of the day, it is people that must collaborate. It is people that must coordinate. Technology is not going to reach out from the smartphone and pull someone to safety. It is technology in the hands of people interested in collaborating, being instantaneously interoperable, that will save lives. As well-educated, motivated emergency managers, you will find yourself in a position to make policy decisions and to influence the direction of an organization, a city agency, or even a state government. It's important that you open your mind to the people and the tools that continue to emerge. In this same book, Bratton writes about his work at cleaning up the streets of New York City and the drastic reduction in crime that took place while he was commissioner. As he developed his plan, he came to the conclusion that it could only be accomplished through a wide-scale, networked, collaborative effort. He wrote, quote, "We needed to jumpstart that, empower cops to deal with small stuff that mattered to communities and the serious stuff that only cops would deal with. In doing so, we'd bring communities forward to collaborate. Cops would collaborate, and together we would signal that bad guys were no longer in control. We'd bring collaboration into the sunlight." End quote.